Ukraine could be about to receive an incredible upgrade to its arsenal, courtesy of the United States of America. Tomahawk missiles. With remarkable range and enormous explosive power, these game-changing missiles would unlock countless new possibilities, allowing Kyiv's forces to carry out destructive deep strikes far and wide across enemy territory. They have the power to bring Russia to its knees and break the will of Vladimir Putin himself, sending the war in a dramatic new direction. Here's why. Developed in the 1970s, the BGM-109 Tomahawk Land Attack Missile, or TLAM, is one of the most powerful land attack cruise missiles in the world. It brings 4 major advantages to the table when compared to other missiles. The first, and perhaps most important of those advantages, is range. Tomahawk missiles can travel extraordinary distances, striking targets up to 1,000 miles away from their launch locations. Some of the earlier Block 2 variants could actually go even further than that, traveling around 1,550 miles, but they were retired some years ago. Regardless, 1,000 miles is a massive distance, especially compared to countless other conventional missiles, many of which have much smaller maximum ranges. Europe's Storm Shadows, for instance, can only travel around 155 miles. Since they can hit targets so far away, Tomahawks open up countless avenues of attack and bring numerous targets into range, empowering their operators with almost unrivaled deep strike capabilities. At the same time, they strike fear into enemy forces. When they know their opponent can hit them anywhere at any time, it becomes much harder to predict their actions and take preventative measures to protect their people and their assets. But range wouldn't matter all that much if these missiles were slow moving or easy to intercept. And that leads neatly onto the Tomahawk's second impressive advantage, agility. Despite measuring up at 20 feet in length with an 8.5-foot wingspan and total weight in excess of 3,300 pounds, these missiles are surprisingly nimble. Powered by Williams International F107 WR402 turbofan engines with TH Dimer fuel and solid fuel rocket boosters, Tomahawks reach peak speeds of around 570 miles per hour. That's not quite the speed of sound, putting Tomahawks in the subsonic missile category rather than supersonic or hypersonic, but it's still remarkably rapid. What's more, Tomahawks follow low-altitude flight paths, typically traveling around 100 to 150 feet above the ground. This makes them harder to detect on enemy radar screens, and more challenging to intercept as well, since the surrounding terrain essentially helps to hide the missiles as they follow their flight paths. In addition, Tomahawks are also able to use an array of guidance systems, including GPS, inertial navigation, and terrain contour matching to reach their intended targets. Thanks to this, Tomahawks almost always hit their targets, and even if enemy forces manage to spot an incoming missile, they often have very little time to react or respond to the threat. On top of all of that, Tomahawks are able to conduct evasive maneuvers mid-flight to minimize their risks of being intercepted, and the latest variants can even be reprogrammed en route to strike up to 15 pre-programmed alternative targets. Plus, they have the capacity to loiter over their targets for extended periods of time before striking, using their onboard cameras to provide valuable battlefield intelligence. This all makes Tomahawks incredibly difficult to deal with. Not only are they fast and agile, but they're also unpredictable. Even if enemy forces think they know where a Tomahawk is headed, its operators could easily adjust its flight path and pick a different target to catch their opponent off guard. As Federico Borsari, a fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis, CEPA, puts it, it's a very fast though still subsonic cruise missile. It uses a combination of different guidance systems to be very accurate. In an interview with the Kyiv Independent, Borsari added, currently, I would say it's the main tool for the US to strike land targets very far away and is launched mostly from naval platforms, including submarines and surface ships. Once it reaches its target, the Tomahawk has the firepower necessary to deal devastating damage, which leads us onto its third important advantage, strength. The most powerful Tomahawk variants can be equipped with high explosive warheads weighing up to 1,000 pounds. They may also be fitted with sub-munition dispensers and BLU-97B combined effects bombs. Put simply, these missiles are more than capable of taking out almost any target in their way. That includes critical military assets and vital pieces of infrastructure, including the likes of command posts, headquarters, ammunition depots, airfields, hangars, ships, fuel storage facilities, bridges, ports, radar stations, air defense systems, and even hardened structures like reinforced bases and underground bunkers. And this isn't just hypothetical, it's proven. Tomahawks have been used since as far back as the early 1990s in the Gulf War and Operation Desert Storm, taking out surface-to-air missile sites, air defense facilities, and command posts with ease. Any military force equipped with Tomahawk missiles has the power to wipe enemy structures off the map whenever they want, and there's very little their opponents can do about it. The fourth and final big plus point of the Tomahawk is flexibility. It was created at the Applied Physics Laboratory of Johns Hopkins University in Maryland, designed to fulfill the US military's need for a medium to long-range cruise missile that was flexible enough to be fitted with a wide range of warheads. The development team decided on a modular design, which has since allowed more than a dozen different variants to be produced over the years. There are anti-ship variants of the Tomahawk, as well as numerous land attack variants equipped with different warheads to take out various types of targets. The Tomahawk design has also been upgraded on numerous occasions over the years, with new technologies introduced and integrated that make these missiles even more flexible and fearsome. All in all, Tomahawks deliver everything one would hope for in a cruise missile, whether it be exceptional range, destructive firepower, and awesome agility in the air. What's more, as mentioned earlier, these are missiles that have been proven in action. The US Air Force, Army, and Navy have all been equipped with Tomahawks over the years, and hundreds have been used in major conflicts and military operations. Over 300 were fired at key Iraqi targets during Operation Desert Fox in 1998, for example. Dozens more struck targets across Afghanistan in Operation Enduring Freedom in the wake of the September 11 terrorist attacks. Others have been used in Libya, Syria, and most recently Iran. Other armed forces around the world, including the British Royal Navy, the Royal Australian Navy, and the Royal Netherlands Navy, have also acquired Tomahawks from the US, and several other countries like Canada, Germany, Poland, and Spain have all expressed an interest in buying some of their own. There are many other cruise and ballistic missiles out there that appear excellent on paper or boast impressive technical specifications and capabilities. Ukraine is even leading the way in this field, recently revealing its long-range Flamingo missiles, for example. However, a lot of modern missile programs are untested and unproven in the field. The Tomahawk, however, has been in service for decades now, effectively destroying huge numbers of enemy targets. It's a highly reliable, immensely destructive piece of hardware and an invaluable addition to any arsenal. For Ukraine, it would be a game changer. And while there hasn't been any official decision to send Tomahawks to Ukraine at this time, it's something that's being looked at closely, according to the US Vice President JD Vance. Speaking in a September 28 interview with Fox News, Vance revealed,
"It's something the president's going to make the final determination on. What the president is going to do is what's in the best interest of the United States of America."
The vice president went on to add,
"But I know that we're having conversations this very minute about that issue."
Clearly, this is something that the US is very seriously considering, and it's something that Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, has called for on several occasions. Indeed, just days ago, news reports emerged detailing closed-door discussions that took place between Zelenskyy and Trump at the recent United Nations General Assembly event. During those talks, Zelenskyy reportedly asked Trump to provide long-range strike capabilities to Ukraine, arguing that Tomahawk missiles would help to pile pressure on Russia's President Vladimir Putin, which could potentially lead to a peace deal. When asked by Axios about how these talks went, Zelenskyy appeared optimistic, stating that Trump was open to the idea and summing up his response with the words,
He said, "We will work on it."
Trump's predecessor, Joe Biden, rejected a request for Tomahawks from Zelenskyy back in 2024, reportedly believing it would be too risky to equip Kyiv with such powerful long-range missiles. For a while, it seemed that Trump would follow a similar path. The 47th president initially appeared reluctant to aid Ukraine with more weapons, preferring instead to focus on pushing peace talks and suggesting ways to end the war through land swaps. In April of this year, for example, the US president said Crimea will stay with Russia. He also repeatedly urged Ukraine to agree to give up some of its occupied territories to Russia as part of ceasefire and peace negotiations. More recently, however, Trump's tone has pivoted quite dramatically in the opposite direction. In September, the Trump administration approved its first major US weapons aid packages for Ukraine. Funded by NATO's Prioritized Ukraine Requirements List, or PEARL, the first shipments arrived a few days later. Then, Trump went one step further, making a bold proclamation on his social media site, Truth Social, in which he announced that Ukraine's forces could, in fact, recover all of their land that's been taken from them by Russia. After getting to know and fully understand the Ukraine-Russia military and economic situation, and after seeing the economic trouble it's causing Russia, I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form. With time, patience, and the financial support of Europe, and in particular NATO, the original borders from where this war started is very much an option. Trump also criticized Russia in his post, accusing it of fighting aimlessly for 3.5 years in a war that should have taken less than a week to win. It's a major shift in stance from the American leader, and one that suggests he's grown tired and frustrated of dealing with Putin's lies and false promises. This was, in effect, confirmed by the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who recently revealed that Trump was really angry with Putin for refusing to engage with Trump's efforts to end the war. Trump has approved the delivery of several major American weapons systems to Ukraine as part of his administration's initial aid package, including Patriot air defenses and HIMARS rocket systems. He also, in his Truth Social post, stated, "We will continue to supply weapons to NATO for NATO to do what they want with them." This all seems to suggest that Trump may be willing to go the next level and let Ukraine have Tomahawks. And that would change everything, because Tomahawks would far exceed any other long-range missile system that Ukraine has received from its Western allies up to this point. They would enhance the Ukrainian arsenal in ways that almost no other weapon possibly could. As Borsari notes, Tomahawks would definitely be a significant upgrade for Ukraine's arsenal, especially in terms of long-range strike capabilities. It would allow Ukraine to deliver a much heavier payload against targets compared to what it's using now. This is because, despite Ukraine's excellent domestic missile programs, like the Long Neptune and Zapsan, it's still largely reliant on Western weapons and drones to carry out long-range attacks and deep strikes on Russian targets. In the iconic Operation Spiderweb attack earlier this year, for instance, Ukraine's forces used relatively simple drones, smuggled to key locations across Russia, to deal billions of dollars worth of damage to Russian aircraft and airfields. Ukraine also regularly conducts incredible drone strikes on important targets like oil refineries, pipelines, fuel storage facilities, and ammunition stocks. This all has a big effect, and Russia is currently facing an unprecedented oil crisis, with fuel shortages reported across the country thanks in large part to Ukraine's strategic strikes on fuel-related facilities. Ukraine's drones have also wiped out important radar systems, air defenses, command posts, and other important locations in Russia and occupied territories, weakening the Kremlin's war machine one piece at a time. There's no doubt that drone strikes are effective, but they're still not as devastating as cruise and ballistic missiles. As Ivan Stupak, former SBU officer and Ukrainian lawmaker, puts it, drones do cause damage. They can fly into windows at defense factories deep in Russia's rear. If they attack us, we will answer them. But let's be honest, 50 kilograms of explosives are just 50 kilograms. 500 kilograms in a missile can make a difference. That's one of the reasons why Russia regularly bombards Ukrainian towns and cities like Kyiv, not just with huge swarms of drones, but dozens of missiles too. Often the drones are designed to simply overwhelm Ukraine's air defenses so that the missiles can fly by and deal the biggest amounts of damage. And when it comes to missile stocks and strength, Russia versus Ukraine is a real mismatch. Russia is believed to have large stocks of Kalibr-class cruise missiles to continue striking Ukrainian cities, and Iskander ballistic missiles too. Ukraine, meanwhile, has just limited numbers of Western missiles, like Storm Shadows and Attackams, and though it's made serious strides with its own domestic missiles, it lacks the infrastructure to produce them in large amounts. The Flamingo, for example, boasts an amazing range of over 1,800 miles or up to 3,000 kilometers and carry warheads weighing over 2,500 pounds. There are conflicting reports about when it will actually enter serial production. Some say as early as 2025, others point to 2026. So its official status remains uncertain. That means Ukraine can't really build any sort of serious strategy around this missile for the time being. If, however, America was to send over a batch of Tomahawks, Ukraine could immediately make plans to carry out a whole range of devastating attacks on important Russian military targets. And the quantity of targets that would fall within the Tomahawk's range is staggering. With Tomahawks, Ukraine could not only strike places in and around the Russian capital of Moscow, but even those much further away, in and around major cities like St. Petersburg, Nizhny Novgorod, and Saratov, to name but a few examples. All of a sudden, countless new Russian air bases, command posts, oil refineries, and production plants would be at risk, and there's already extensive evidence of Ukraine's innovation, ingenuity, and efficiency when it comes to picking its targets and striking at the Kremlin's weakest and most valuable locations. Unlike Russia, which recklessly bombards Ukraine and seems to send its drones and missiles over the borders without any clear mission apart from killing as many people as possible, Ukraine does things differently. It chooses the targets that matter the most, the refineries, the ammo depots, and so on, the kinds of targets that truly cripple the Kremlin's war machine and make it much harder for Russia to advance, capture territory, and keep its fumbling economy afloat. In doing so, one strike at a time, Ukraine makes the war much harder for Russia to sustain and, at least in theory, puts more pressure on Putin to finally accept he's not going to get what he wants and agree to a peace deal. It's taking time and coming at a cost, but Ukraine's strategy is working. Russia's oil production capacities have taken a major hit. Its economy is weakening by the day, and its forces are struggling to gain ground along the front lines. Tomahawks could accelerate this entire process by an incalculable amount, giving Ukraine the power to take out dozens more critical Russian facilities and push the Kremlin to the brink of absolute catastrophe. At the same time, there are challenges for Kyiv to overcome if it wants to make the most of any Tomahawks it receives. For one thing, each Tomahawk missile is said to cost around $2 million, so it's highly unlikely the US would be willing to send a huge stockpile. But even a small amount would be enough for Kyiv to deal serious damage to its enemies, as long as it treated them with care and planned its attacks with the same sort of precision and strategy seen so far, reducing the risk of any missiles going to waste. The second big challenge relates to launchers, because missiles like these require specialist launch platforms to fire from. As Vadim Skibitsky, deputy head of Ukraine's military intelligence agency, GUR, explains, Tomahawks are not easy to use. Skibitsky told The Guardian earlier this year, "The main launchers are combat ships or strategic bombers. We don't have any strategic bomber aircraft." As such, the US will not only have to provide the missiles themselves, but also launch platforms like Typhoons to fire them from. Alternatively, Ukraine's other NATO allies would have to construct and provide a suitable platform, which would demand more time, money, and resources. This could push back any possible Tomahawk strikes on Russia, giving the Kremlin more valuable time to ramp up its aggression along the front lines. Because of these issues, some analysts have suggested that the US supply Ukraine with Tomahawk alternatives, like Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile, JASM. Borsari notes that these missiles would be easier for Kyiv's forces to work with. It has a range of roughly 1,000 kilometers, it's very powerful, and it could be a good solution for Ukraine, and much easier to integrate into Ukrainian aircraft compared to the Tomahawk. Meanwhile, other allies of Ukraine are also looking into ways to strengthen Kyiv's deep strike capabilities. Germany, for example, has announced it will supply long-range missiles to Ukraine very shortly, very soon, according to Chancellor Friedrich Merz. This, combined with whichever additional weapons the US decides to send, will strengthen Ukraine enormously, delivering a much-needed boost to its missile supplies and pushing Russia well and truly onto the back foot as the conflict continues. Now, learn more about how bad the situation is becoming in Russia in our recent breakdown of the dramatic fuel crisis sweeping the nation. Alternatively, check out our video on another recent upgrade to Ukraine's arsenal. Gripen fighter jets from Sweden, famed for their speed, agility, and advanced technologies, and ready to help Kyiv gain an all-important aerial advantage. And finally, make sure to subscribe to our channel too, so you can find out about important new developments and frontline events from the Russia-Ukraine war and other conflicts across the globe.